Chapter 21. Ned's Ruse. In spite of herself, Nancy gasped at the Frenchman's announcement. "You know the Fontaines?" he asked hopefully. Nancy countered with, "Are they the ones who used to be in River Heights?" "Yes. Where are they now?" "I don't know, but please tell me more about the smuggling. It's unbelievable," Nancy said. The man gave her a long, searching stare, then replied, "This Henri Fontaine is an artist, quite a clever one. While in Paris, he was contacted by an art dealer named Thomas René. He ordered 12 pictures from Monsieur Fontaine." "What sort of pictures?" Nancy asked. "They were portraits of a ballet dancer in 12 different poses," the Frenchman replied. "The Fontaine girl is very capable in the ballet and posed for the pictures." "That sounds like a convenient arrangement," Ned remarked non-committally. "Where did René sell the portraits?" "They were to be entered in a race among art dealers for an order from a famous dancing school. But before this could take place, every one of the pictures was stolen." "And René had no idea who had stolen them?" Ned asked. The Frenchman threw up his arms in a helpless gesture, then replied, "Not at the time, but he does now." "Please go on," Nancy requested, as the man paused. "When the police failed, René requested every art dealer in France to help him. The pictures were so unusual in content and treatment that they would be readily recognizable. But no one in France had any inkling as to where they were." "And then?" Nancy asked. "René talked it over with some of his friends," the Frenchman declared. "He decided that if the portraits were not in France, then they must have been shipped to England or the United States. I checked with the custom authorities and made a startling discovery." Nancy looked up quickly. "Yes?" "I learned," the Frenchman explained, "that a young man fitting the description of Henri Fontaine had used the name of René to send 11 of the pictures to the United States." "How amazing!" Ned exclaimed. "Why 11 pictures?" Nancy asked. "What became of the 12th? The Frenchman shrugged. "Who knows?" he said. "Perhaps it was stolen from Henri Fontaine, or he may have sold it in order to secure funds for some of his underhanded activities." "Underhanded?" Nancy repeated, but the man did not explain. Nancy leaned back against the step, looked up at the sky, and closed her eyes. She was recalling descriptions of various people in the case. Suddenly she remembered the Fontaine's description of René as a tall, thin, gaunt-looking fellow. Suddenly Nancy straightened up. Could this man be René? She must find out. Smiling, she said, "As an amateur detective, I could almost believe that you are Thomas René." The man started. Then he said, "You are a clever and observant young lady." "Yes, I am Thomas René." It was Nancy's turn to be amazed. She had fully expected the man to deny it. "You seem surprised," he said, amused. "I have nothing to hide. But I wanted to make sure you were to be trusted before I revealed my identity. Now, let us get down to work." "What about the jewel smuggling?" Nancy reminded him. "Oh, yes. I am inclined to think that the jewels were connected with the portraits. At the same time, the 12 paintings disappeared from my gallery. A large quantity of valuable gems were stolen in a suburb of Paris. They may have been secreted in the frames before the portraits were sent to this country." "Then you merely suspect the Fontaines," Nancy remarked. "You do not have any clear evidence pointing to them as the jewel smugglers." "Perhaps you are right," the Frenchman conceded. "But the Fontaines also disappeared at very time." "I see," said Nancy, rising. "Well, if I can help you, I'll let you know." Renee and Ned also rose, and the Frenchman said, "I have the hunch, as you call it, that you young people will solve this mystery for me. And whom have I the honor of working with? What are your names?" Before Nancy could say anything, Ned gripped her arm and then asked Renee, "Did you ever hear of the Colemans?" Tomas Rene shook his head slowly. Nancy was puzzled by Ned's ruse, especially since she recalled that Coleman was his middle name. Ned went on, "I think we'd better be on our way, dear. We can contact Mr. Rene later on if we learn anything about the Fontaines or his missing portraits." Half dragging and half urging her, Ned started off through the woods. They had not gone far when Nancy asked for an explanation of what he had done. "I don't trust that guy," Ned replied. But what was the idea of giving him an impression like that? "Impression like what?" Ned asked in some surprise. "Anyone who heard you would probably think we're husband and wife, especially an impressionable man like Rene." Ned laughed heartily. "Well, someday I hope it'll be true. And for your information, I hope he'll think we're married now. If he's a spy or a kidnapper, as I suspect, he'd better not find out your name is Drew." Nancy agreed and said she did not trust Rene either. Ned remarked, "He didn't have to tell us that long story about his friend Rene. I'll bet he wouldn't have admitted his identity if you hadn't asked him. The less he knows about us, the better." Nancy smiled, then took Ned's arm in her own and said, "You're on the warpath, aren't you?" "Yes, and I'm going to do something about it," he declared. "I want you to walk to the car and drive to police headquarters. Get hold of Captain Crane and a couple of his patrolmen and bring them back here. I'm sure Rene's story won't stand up when the police question him about his activities. I'll return to the house and keep him there." "If Rene plays innocent," said Nancy, starting off, "at least we can have the house searched. Hélène and Henri may be there. Somehow, Ned, I just can't bring myself to believe they're guilty of this jewel smuggling." "Nor I," said Ned. He left her, and Nancy hurried on toward the car. She had nearly reached the road when suddenly a coat was thrown forcefully over her head, and both hands were pinned behind her. Nancy screamed, but the sound was too muffled to carry far. "So you are Nancy Drew," her captor snarled. "Double-crosser! You will never notify the police, and you will be sorry you ever tried it." End of chapter 21.